Hello, class. This is this week's discussion post, History 701. This week we are supposed to dig through the America History and Life database under the school's library for at least three sources that have to do with our research topic. I once again focused on the history of my hometown, Texarkana, preferably focusing in on 1873. These kind of focus from 1873 to about 1920. In the history of the town. My research will focus in beyond 1920 as well, from the railroad origins in 1873 all the way through the 20s, even up to the mid 20th century is where I want to focus, mostly on prohibition and crime and things like that the railroad brought into town and the economic boost that it brought into town. But mainly focusing on crime. These three sources that I found in the database were really helpful, ones that I've never actually seen. That database actually proved to be the most helpful so far in this research topic. The first source that I encountered was about by Judy Hoofman, written a few years ago, but still relevant. It's called "A Day in the Life of a Texarkana Homemaker" from 1900 to 1917, and it's basically about the female role in this community in the early 20th century, in the first quarter probably of the 20th century. And the reason why this is relevant for my research, because it not only does it describe the lifestyle and the responsibilities of housewives and wives in the Texarkana area, Texas area from 1900 on to 1917, it focuses on their daily activities, their household chores, children, religious practices, including attending church and things like that. But it's also an important component of the women's sphere of influence in the town at that time. And a lot of this is brought on. They wouldn't have had that influence, and they wouldn't have had a lot of these activities had it not been for the economic boost that the railroad brought into town. So this article is actually really good, something I've never really thought about, as such as the female perspective of the railroad influence of the town. The second source that I focused on or dug into was by a former professor of mine from Texarkana College here in town, Dr. Beverly Rowe. And this one was called "Changes in the Status of Texarkana, Texas Women." I believe this is her thesis or part of her dissertation, is "Changes in the Status of Texarkana, Texas Women from 1880 to 1920." So she focused on those 40 years and the role of women, much like Hoofman's article, but it also it kind of stayed along the lines of how the railroad contributed to that social culture in Texarkana during that period. But it kind of focuses in, kind of goes beyond 1917 into the kind of early prohibition and things of that nature. But it's really also hits home because she was a former professor of mine who wrote the article or the work, as well as it's a hometown kind of perspective of this really thoroughly researched piece. Third and last article that I want to talk about is also by Dr. Rowe, but this one's from 2008, and this has to do with an archaeological study done in Texarkana here in town in that time, that were looking into 1873, which is the origin of the railroad here in town, to 1900. And she dug into this article. There's a lot here, but I can only really say that they kind of dug into where different hotels were in town near the railroad junction and how they all intermingled together around the railroad and how the railroad kind of grew that out, and this article does a really good job just covering that time period and the things they find, and you can kind of see the sizes of and the stature of what these things were, taking a Wild West town to a hub, basically. So it's really interesting and all three of these give a really better insight into this town that I'm researching. Thank you.